Hi everyone and welcome to my Season 6 feedback video. This is something that I will send to Blizzard. This is just feedback that I have gathered from talking to my stream, playing the game non-stop 12 hours a day for the past month, and I think I have gathered a lot of insights from many people and myself playing the game so that I can discuss it here. I think overall Blizzard has done a relatively good job with the expansion. I think the Spiritborn class is very fun, putting aside the fact that it's completely busted and bugged. But in the future, where those bugs are fixed, in Season 7, let's say, I think that Spiritborn is going to remain a very cool, very fun class and probably one of my main classes. So in general, they did a good job there. And overall, the game revamps have been relatively successful, I think. But there are some problems that remain, and I want to talk through them. So I have this document here of stuff that I wrote down, just some talking to many people from my stream and, just myself also playing. And yeah, I'm going to go through this here. So we're going to talk about Paragons, the items, how we play the game, and stash, class balance, season theme, and then future wish list. So this is kind of the roadmap here for this video. And let's jump straight in. So Paragons, let's start with this here. So recently I have completed Paragon 300. You can see it down here. I gotta say, Paragon grind was way more fun than I had anticipated. Coming from Diablo 3, I was usually always like the guy who tried to push all of the rank 1s with the lowest Paragon possible. I just didn't really like the, kind of futile grind for just XP without really getting the gratification of doing, getting any other progression basically. So the Paragon system in Diablo 3 really put me off. And in Diablo 4 we were kind of moving in the same direction, but at least I knew it was finite. And I think that's a very important distinction here. The finality of reaching Paragon 300 and then you are done is way better than what we had in the past. So I think that is already a really good start. And overall, I think that the Paragon system has actually worked out relatively well. It seems like they have exactly accomplished what they tried to do, giving us a long-term objective to grind out, especially for the blasters like myself, for example. It does take a while to get there, but it also doesn't feel like you're missing out on anything if you don't get there. Paragon 200 is easily done in very little time, and then it kind of ramps up from there, and then let's say 250 or so, you kind of have everything you want, and everything after that is just optional, very minor improvements. So I really like that. There's no build that relies on getting Paragon 300 or even anything past 250, let's say. I think 250 is mostly the target that I would be aiming for in the future, or that I would also recommend to people that are more dedicated, that want to min-max their builds. You should try to aim for roughly that number, which is still pretty easy to achieve compared to 300. And overall, after having done the grind, I gotta say it was really nice. Number go up is just a good feeling, even though it doesn't really do anything. You get 5 level ups and the power gain is 1% on your character or something like that. It's so minor that it really doesn't matter, but it still, gives you this tiny little thing. I didn't really mind that, I gotta say. So that was well done. I think for the future, it would be nice if pits wasn't just the only thing that you can grind for XP. There is Infernal Hordes, which is roughly half as good as pit or so, plus minus. And then there is a whole lot of nothing until, maybe Nightmare Dungeons or so that are 5 times worse than the pits or something like that. So the balance between the different activities is just not present. And I would like to see a heavy nerf for pit XP, a slight nerf for Infernal Horde XP, and then an overall nerf to the experience required. So that in general, it kind of evens out a bit more, because personally, for example, I've been doing a lot of Nightmare Dungeons and your XP bar just does not move in Nightmare Dungeons basically after a certain level. But then you go to the pit and you speedrun those 90-second, pit whatever, and suddenly your XP bar goes brrr, and yeah, that's really wacky. I think we shouldn't force everyone into just running pit for XP. After a certain point, people are just done with the pit. You have your glyphs. You don't really want to do just the pit. And yeah, it does make sense. It has the only difficulty in the game that actually scales beyond Tom and 4, but you don't even get rewarded for going to high tiers in the pit. Pit is just OP, basically, for no reason really. Even the low tiers of pit are OP for XP. So I think that should maybe be addressed a little bit. And other than that, yeah, for long term, I would like to see a bigger revamp of the Paragon system. I was actually expecting this in the first expansion. I don't mind that this system works the way it does right now, but it could be way better, I think. So first of all, legendary effects on glyphs are extremely boring. I think all of those should be changed to something cool in the future, basically mini aspects, let's say, or something like that. Maybe some inspiration. It could be something like the Spirit Hall from the Spiritborn here, for example, to get the idea of you know, how strong or how impactful these changes could be for the glyphs. And in general, I would like to see smaller boards, fewer points, just to like, you know, make setting up a character easier, make setting like, you know, respecking easier. I don't want to click 300 points every single time. So that's just kind of like how it is. Yeah, overall, I would like to see a revamp of the entire system, long term at least. But for now, it kind of does the job. But yeah, especially like where you get XP should probably be changed a little bit. All right, let's talk about aspects. Well, I really like the new ancestral aspect system, I gotta say, where you can get 5 more ranks on ancestral pieces. I think that is really cool because every single aspect, everything ancestral that drops could be an aspect, and it could be an upgrade. Even when you're long done with your gear, you still keep finding these like big pieces, and either you sell them or you use them. And I really love that system. I think that's cool. It's probably a bit too punishing, especially because there is an imbalance between different aspects. One example I have here is interdiction that goes from 10% to 15% just in an ancestral range. That is a 50% increase of this original power, which is just too much. It's just like it should be a smaller gap, you know. It should go from like 10 to 12 maybe, or something like that. So there needs to be some fine-tuning, I think. And overall, there's also some builds that rely exclusively on aspects that are also disadvantaged, you know, like Aerostorm's Rogue, Blizzard Sorg. There's more builds like that where an aspect is your build basically, and if you don't get this 21 out of 21 aspect, yeah, feels bad. So there could be maybe some better ways to get those aspects. There could be like some other, like, you know, adjustments to, for example, when you get an ancestral, it also cuts off the bottom 5 rows, so you extend the top 5. Or the extended the top end by 5, and then it cuts off the bottom 5, for example. Stuff like that could like maybe make it a bit more consistent to try to get those ancestral aspects, just to make it somewhat realistic to actually max out, or at least nearly max out, most of the aspects by the time that, for example, you hit Paragon 300, or you have like your, you know, 1 to 2 GA stuff and your mythics and everything is masterworked really well. You know, at that point should also be kind of like where you slowly approach perfect aspects, let's say. So there could be some improvements to the system. Also, the tooltips is a bit of a problem. A lot of people, especially at the start of the season, they've said that, you know, their codex is bugged and they can't upgrade their powers because they didn't understand the new system. So I think the tooltips need to change. It needs to be clear that a non-ancestral cannot actually have the max roll. Maybe just like show the entire range, and then you just never go beyond the 16 out of 21, for example, on a non-ancestral piece. Something like that here would be like a very minor change that would actually have a pretty large impact. Now let's talk about uniques. So in my book, uniques are actually in a pretty good spot now. A lot of builds run a lot of uniques, so it's still yeah, a bit on the edge, I guess. I would definitely be careful in you know, making new really powerful uniques, or, you know, in general, we need maybe a slightly better balance between ancestral, like normal legendaries basically, and uniques. Some of them are just very good, very impactful. Fist of Fate is one of those cases where it just kind of goes into every single rogue build pretty much, and these kind of things. So yeah, maybe some nerfs are also needed. But overall, I think uniques are in a fine spot. What bothers me is mythics, and because they are extremely powerful, and late game you just put so many mythics into every single build. You know, almost every build now runs Shroud of False Death, and then either the Perdition Helm or the Shaco, and then many builds also run the Starless. You know, these items are just so strong, and it kind of makes sense that they are. They're rare, they're like a target to farm, and so on. But I've said this before, and I will say it again, I would like to see a cap of 1 mythic per item, because they just like homogenize builds way too much. Like, so many builds just have exactly the same 3-4 mythics in every single, you know, everywhere basically. And I don't really like that. It takes away from the progression of a build. You know, I make an alt and I equip the same 3 items already fully masterworked, and I'm like half done with my setup. First of all, you know, it takes away from that. And also there's like not really that much room for other items to shine. We have so many cool uniques, there's so many cool aspects in the game, and they just never really get their time to shine because mythics are just so, you know, overpowering basically, compared to all the other stuff that we could put in those slots. And with a mythic limit of 1, we could buff them, and we could make this a real choice. Like, do you want that Starless for the big resource, or do you want that Shaco for the big cooldown, or do you want that Shroud for all of the small stuff, or do you want a Tyrael to just become immortal? You know, this would actually be a kind of choice to make, and then you can build everything else around that. And I think this would be a way more interesting scenario for the future here. Also, another thing is that very often we find like, you know, multi-GA uniques. One example would be like just a Kepeleke, you know, very popular item this season. And you find like a 3GA or 4GA Kepeleke, and then it has like a terrible, literally unusable unique affix that is kind of like a feels bad man moment. I'd like to see some option to go, for example, to an NPC in town and reroll, you know, the affix, you know, take a spark. You know, I have 20 sparks right now. I'm not trying to boast, but I have many sparks that I don't need for anything. And it would be cool, and it would be an appropriate cost, I think, if I could use my sparks and, you know, take my free GA Capeleke that has a terrible roll and try to reroll the affix until I get, you know, a usable value, let's say. So that would be nice. A bit of Gamba is always fun, and, you know, there would actually be like a reason to, for example, keep doing bosses, because you still need uniques. It would have this entire connection to bosses, because this is where I get the sparks, this is where I get the uniques, so it kind of like works together. And you have a bit of like agency as well, which would just be way more fun, I believe. All right, Masterworking. Now that's a pretty big pain point. So for Masterworking, I gotta say it's in a relatively bad spot. Season 5 was pretty good, I would say. We got lots of Neve Iron. We had an easy way to get gold from Infernal Hordes. Inflation is through the roof anyway on softcore because of RMT and botting anyway. You sell one item, you get 10 billion gold, and, you know, this is kind of like how many people do it. They find like one good item, they sell it to someone, and then they have gold forever. But especially on hardcore, this is not a thing. Especially for solo players, this is not a thing. It's so hard to get any kind of gold. You know what's the best way of getting gold for a solo player? You do boss, well, not even boss rotas, I guess. You farm the bosses, and you vendor uniques to get gold. You know, this is how you get gold right now. The, you know, Whispers, forget about it. Infernal Hordes, forget about it. You get like 5 million in like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something. You can do one Masterwork reset. It's terrible. So this is a joke. We need a better way to get gold. And that should not be vendoring items, I think. So that's number one. And in general, I think Masterworking needs an upgrade to, you know, how punishing, or you know, some change to how punishing it feels, basically. Because right now it's like, okay, you have, you know, your good gear, you have your mythics, you have your items. And then number one is, if I ever find an upgrade to an item I'm already using, I have to do the entire Masterworking process again with all of the punishing RNG that it brings. So, you know, I'm very hesitant to, for example, take my 1 GA item that I might eventually find a better copy of, or find a 2 GA item, and then have to do all the Masterworking again. So I think this is, number one, it holds people back from actually really Masterworking the gear to perfection, because eventually they're going to get a better item, or you just don't even start Masterworking your gear to perfection until you get at least 2 GAs, let's say, and this can take forever. You know, most of my gear, after playing like 350 hours this season, is actually 1 greater affix as a self-found player, basically. So you don't get even 2 GA items, but if I ever do that, I'm gonna actually feel bad because I have to go do the Masterworking again in some cases. You know, if it's like something where I have to hit specific stats because they're so good, yeah, it can be really painful, especially combined with this gold problem here. But I think a better system could just be that we get to choose like how far we reset the Masterworking. So let's say we go to rank 4, we hit the thing we want, and then we go to rank 8 and we don't hit the thing we want. We reset and we're back at 4 and we're not back at 0. So I think something like this would be a better system. There could also be like a pretty heavy cost attached to that, so that you, let's say you lock in your result at rank 4 and then you lock it in at rank 8, and then you only have to do like the last 4 ranks basically, you know, over and over until you get the thing. This will give you like a bit more of a straightforward way to progress your character, to progress the item that you're working on. Because, for example, if you have, you know, these very impactful items, let's say a greater affix, cooldown, Shaco, and you know, having that 1 extra Masterwork crit on the cooldown is so important for some builds, because you need to hit certain breakpoints, or, you know, like Lightning Spear Sorks have like hyper scaling with cooldown. If you don't have that extra 5% cooldown on your Shaco, then, you know, your build is like half as strong or something like that. And if then I have my Shaco and I try to improve it because it's a 2 out of 3, but I want to get the 3 out of 3, then I can't even start working on it until I have grinded for like dozens of hours to get, you know, hundreds of thousands of materials and get, you know, 1 billion gold or 2 billion gold, and then I have a kind of realistic chance to get that 3 out of 3. But if I just start working on it whenever I got something, then I will most likely end up with nothing, or a worse result than before, and that's just terrible. So I think something needs to change here. Of what I just explained, we need some way of like you know, saving the progress, or just resetting certain ranks, or locking in certain results, or something like that. I don't necessarily want to make the Masterwork grind much less than it is now. I think it's fine that Masterworking is like a very long grind, a very endgame thing, but it just feels bad the way it currently works. It has a lot of problems with, you know, motivation, let's say, of when you want to Masterwork your gear, because of what I just explained with the 1 and 2 GA upgrades, or, you know, redoing my existing items. So something needs to happen here, I think. Also, Rotas, let's talk about this. Boss Rotas are way too good for everything, I think. There is, like, you know, if anyone ever asked me something, where do I get this, where do I get that, what do I do most efficiently for this thing, the answer 99% of the time is do Boss Rotas. And that is terrible. I think that needs to change. I think Boss Rotas should be exclusively, you get uniques, you get mythics, and then you are out. That is it. You know, I want no herbs, I want no iron chunks, I want no rawhide, I want no runes. I just want my uniques, and then I'll leave Duriel Cave forever until the next season. This is how it should be. And like making these bosses like drop these by far the best amount of materials and gold, you know, for solo players. I talked about vendoring as well. You know, this is just terrible. Like, this needs to change. And I want to see a redistribution of the rewards from boss rotas into, you know, infernal hordes, into legions, into nightmare dungeons, whatever. Just don't make boss rotas the best for everything. I want to pay my Duriel tax, and then I want to be done. That's it. Undercity, well, I gotta say, Undercity is pretty cool. It has this cool, like, you know, cooldown buff that you get all the time, which makes it like feel a bit different from other contents, for example. Overall, I kind of like the Undercity. I think there can definitely be improvements here. Number one, there seems to be quite a few bugs with certain tributes, certain bargains, and also just like people getting black screens and getting stuck and stuff like that. So some polishing is needed, let's say, at least. I think bargains could be made way more powerful and impactful. And right now, it seems like also sometimes people go for like these, like, you know, for example, the very costly one for the amulet passes. And then you just get like a non-ancestral amulet or something. That kind of feels bad, man. There needs to be a better way to combine tributes with bargains, for example, a better way to target farm, you know, really pump out this extra gold, these extra materials that you have to try to get this one thing that you really need. So they can be more costly, but way better, for example. I don't want to run the Undercity all that much. I think it's fine to do it once in a while. And right now we get too many tributes and they are not really too impactful. So I'd like to see better tributes, more rare, better bargains, more costly, and just generally maybe beef up the experience a little bit with some cool RNG, maybe some, you know, extra bosses that spawn, more goblins that spawn, maybe an extra level that can appear, you know, something that makes the runs a little bit different here and there as well. But overall, I think it's a good start, the Undercity. So I'd like to see improvements to everything that it does, especially, you know, making it a way better tool of getting what you want, basically. But overall, I think it has been relatively successful, at least. Now, speaking of something that is not successful, the Dark Citadel. So it seems like the concept of it is actually well thought out. I think they've done a relatively good job at actually making, you know, these kind of like multiplayer mechanics in an ARPG. But it's, yeah, I guess I could have told you before, but something like Citadel is just not really gonna be very popular. So I'm not sure what the numbers are exactly, but I have not really heard from a lot of people that really grind it out, that really do the Citadel a lot. And many people that I talk to also just haven't done it at all, even. So there doesn't seem to be any kind of motivation to go in there at all, especially for solo players that don't even have, let's say, friends that play with them in Diablo 4, for example. I've done it a few times. I generally enjoyed my experience, I gotta say. And speaking as someone who is mostly hardcore SSF, I didn't mind that this is a forced group type of content. And some people say, man, I want to do it solo, but I don't really see a way to design this in a way that could be soloable in any way. So I think it's okay that there is this type of content and it's only for groups, and this is just how it is. As long as this is purely optional and it's not like, you know, Omega rewarding or something like that, I think it should be fine. It should be rewarding for the time investment. It should be like on the same level as other stuff, let's say, for the time spent, if you do like, let's say, a good clean run. But it should not be like OP, you know, just because it's a weekly reward or something like that. So don't make solo players feel bad. But I wouldn't go and rework everything so that it can be soloed, I think. Maybe for hardcore, one suggestion would be to give like a Citadel special scroll to get out, because on hardcore, no one does the Citadel. So that is certainly something. I've done some hardcore Citadel runs, and some of them even with randoms on the party finder and stuff, but man, it is scary. Maybe there could be at least, you know, something so that they can avoid griefers or stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, for the Citadel, I guess to sum it up here, I kind of liked it. I don't think that it was really like a big thing or like a big selling point or anything like that. I'm not sure how much Blizzard should really invest here for the future. But yeah, maybe we're gonna get some other cool raids that kind of build on what they've already learned from here, and it's gonna be even better in the future. But yeah, I would be at least kind of careful in like how many resources go into this. All right, Helltide. Can't say I have done really a lot of Helltide this season. This is mostly because we get so spammed with boss materials all the time. We have opals now, we have like these random drops from elites. You just get it so much, and I don't know, it's crazy this season. So I think that generally boss material drops should be toned down a little bit again. Okay, with opals dropping out in Season 7, I guess that will already happen kind of naturally, but even without them, you get so much stuff. I have multiple mules full of stacks of boss materials. So number one, they need to stack larger. And yeah, second, it's just like too much, I think. So I get so many boss mods without even trying to get them. You know, I never really felt like I was even actively trying to get boss materials. I was never really compelled to go to Helltide to farm living steel, or to, you know, farm the blood maiden for the blood, or, you know, go to whispers for the hearts. I just get them. And yeah, this is maybe a bit too much. I would like to see a bit more of like a target farming, like, okay, I want to farm Barshan, okay, I'm gonna do a round of whispers now. And man, I want to farm Gilguar, I need this thing. Yeah, I'm gonna farm like the next 3 Helltides, or something like that. Right now, I think there's just like too little, like, you know, targeting. Too much, just we get overwhelmed with loot, I feel, and this can maybe change a little bit to make this a bit more like has a purpose. And also the target farming of items in the Helltide is relatively bad. We have these chests, and you can open like this, you know, glove chest, and you can open a helm chest, but they drop like, you know, 2 or 3 items, and that's it. And then there's no other helm chest or no other glove chest again after that. I think that the general, like, you know, target farming purpose of Helltide could also be massively improved here to give us a bit of a reason to go there. All right, let's talk about the pit. We see it in action right now in the background. But there's a lot of stuff to talk about with the pit. First of all, the progression, you know, like constantly running out of monsters, constantly backtracking to find the last few guys in the last corner is extremely annoying. So that needs to change ASAP. We need a 3rd floor or something like that. I think that would be a better solution than trying to min-max the progression and the monster spawns in a very complicated way or something like that. I think just add a 3rd floor. It also allows us, for example, to actually have a bit of like, you know, strategy, or a bit of like agency of, okay, I can't deal with this pack, I'm gonna move on to the next. And, you know, you don't have to kill like every single monster in order to spawn the boss, for example. So I think that's probably be the best way to do this here. A lot of people ask for pit leaderboards. But before we do that, I think we need some massive upgrades to how the pit functions. So number 1 is what I just explained, but number 2 is also pit pushing is just not really fun. If you compare this to Diablo 3, yeah, Diablo 3 pushing was fun. This is basically all I've done, you know, for around a decade before I went to Diablo 4. And this is how I built my stream and my YouTube channel. It was mostly based on pushing solo and getting rank 1s and whatever. But in Diablo 4, I just don't really have the motivation to do the same, because it's just not really that fun. We don't have the option to pull lots of packs together and then, you know, actually have like really spicy combat. We don't have the option to, you know, play well compared to Diablo 3. In Diablo 3, there was like a real large skill components. There was pylon manipulation. There was playing around elite affixes, timing your abilities, timing the pylons. All the stuff is completely missing in Diablo 4, for example. Now, I have literally an 80-minute video on pushing in Diablo 3, and that's just one of many videos that I made on that subject. I have like a, I don't know, 20-page article on how to push in Diablo 3. I cannot write anything like that for Diablo 4. Not that I really want to, let's say. But what I'm saying is, we are missing the strategy part. We're missing the player skill component big time in Diablo 4. So there just is not enough of room for someone like myself to try to beat someone who's stronger than me, because it's so largely based on how strong is your gear and not so much based on how good are you as a player. So I think this is a massive problem when it comes to making leaderboards for the pit. It would still be kind of interesting to have them, but I think when it comes to like actually people trying to compete, it would be kind of a shit show when it comes to especially softcore, because of RNT, and, you know, a lot of people that, you know, are on the unofficial leaderboards, for example, have extremely unrealistically good gear that no one will ever be able to like grind naturally, at least without massive amounts of trading. So solo players are just massively disadvantaged. It's so largely focused on just having good gear and so little focused on playing well that I think something needs to change here. So we need like more interesting stuff going on in the pits, especially when it comes to like pit 100 plus, for example. That is like the optional, let's say, push content, let's say. There needs to be, you know, more cool things that appear, you know, that make it harder, that make it spicier. You know, we can have like auras that come back from Diablo 2, like a fanaticism aura, cold aura, you know, any kinds of auras, you know, like the champions that we have for the damage reduction aura. I'd like to see more stuff like that with other auras, and then you have to decide, you know, there's like a pack and there's like 4 different auras in that pack, and then you decide, okay, which one do we kill first? You know, is this one the most dangerous? Is this one? Like, what do? You play around some stuff, increase the amount of elites that appear, increase the affixes per elite, you know, give the elite affixes to the bosses. I don't know, there's so much stuff that it could do to make it spicier, to make it more interesting, to add more of a skill component, you know, make maybe more pylons or make the pylons more impactful, make new pylons that actually have like a bit of like, you know, a potential like, you know, turn it around effect when you're behind. You know, all this kind of stuff is completely missing in Diablo 4. And if we get to leaderboards, personally, as someone who's done this for literally like 10,000 hours in Diablo 3, I would not feel too motivated right now to go and push to rank 1 all the time on Diablo 4. It's just how it is. The pit is not as fun to push as Diablo 3 graduates were. Another kind of like easy thing to change here would be to make the pit just shorter, I think. We actually had that, I think, when the pit was first introduced on the PTR in Season 4. I think it was a 10-minute timer, and I think that was just way better than a 15-minute timer. Simply because the runs are faster, the fights are shorter, the bosses don't last 8 minutes every time or something like that, because you don't even have that much time, right? So if the runs were just shorter, then you would be forced into lower tiers where combat is more dynamic and don't have these like super spongy elites, you don't have these 8-minute boss fights, and everything would just kind of feel more smooth, it would feel more dynamic. So I think this is like also a very easy win here. Just make the pits like a shorter duration. So this is really what I would suggest here as well. But yeah, this is like kind of the overall pit feedback that I have here. Overall, I do like grinding the pit. Like speedrunning the pit is relatively good, I think. Pushing the pit is not good. And especially with so many people asking for leaderboards and with pits being kind of like the destined, at least existing feature in the game that would, you know, be like a fit for leaderboards, let's say. There needs to be some changes before those leaderboards come to make pit just way more interesting. Or together with those leaderboards being introduced, we need like a big update on the pit. When it comes to leaderboards themselves, I would also like to see more stuff that is like conquests in Diablo 3. I think conquests in Diablo 4 would be superb. So just like a little side quest here towards leaderboards in general. Conquest, for example, in number 3 was like the first 1,000 people to clear a GR45 in a season, or the first 1,000 people to kill all bosses within 20 minutes in a season, or the first 1,000 people to do a cursed chest and clear 350 enemies. You know, this kind of stuff. And this was really cool. We could have so much cool stuff with Conquest in Diablo 4. You know, the first 1,000 people to hit Paragon 300. The first 1,000 people to do solo Torment for Lilith. The first 1,000 people to, you know, do anything really. There could be so much cool stuff as a kind of like the short-term season start leaderboard stuff that, you know, like people are racing and, you know, even people that are not playing all day every day to even have a chance to get on this or so. I think it would still be interesting to see what did people do, how long did it take. You know, they would like to watch this kind of stuff. There would be an objective. You know, this is an achievement. And even if you don't get the first 1,000, maybe you still do that objective and you get like a little reward for it, you know, get like a spark or whatever. So that even people that don't go on the leaderboard, they can still do that conquest and get something for it or something. And you can also reward the people that actually do get on a leaderboard. You can say, okay, everyone who gets in the top 1K on any conquest gets like a new mount, and everyone who's in the top 100 gets, you know, the mount trophy as well. And everyone who's in the top 10 also gets, you know, a title or whatever, right? So there's so many things. So I would really like to see, you know, something done for this, which is just, you know, it's just wasted potential, honestly. That's what it is. So we need something. And yeah, this is my opinion here. All right. Let's talk about stash. Stash space is still a problem, I gotta say, especially with the introduction of runes. Like one of your 6 stash tabs is entirely dedicated to runes. Maybe on softcore you can kind of get away with it with keeping most of them in your inventory, but the inventory is not large enough to keep all of them. So you always have to put some in your stash, and then you get like random new drops. You have to put those in a stash, and there's a lot of like micromanaging. So overall, you just have one stash dedicated to runes, and that's it, which is just kind of terrible. We already have a very small stash. We need like a dedicated rune page. I want to have a rune stash where I have one slot for every single type of rune, and you know, it's grayed out if I don't have one, and it has all my runes if I have them. and they stack to infinity, and that's it. So this is what I want. Give us like an extra stash page for that. And honestly, the same with boss materials and, you know, elixirs, whatever. I would like to see these, you know, specialized stash tabs, because everyone has these things. And it's not like, you know, some players do and some players don't. Everyone has at least some Millionate Hearts, some Living Steel, some, you know, eggs for Duril or whatever. Like, everyone gets the same stuff and has the same stuff lying around. And I would like to see like a way better, you know, like item management system here, basically, that we need. And overall, I would really like to see a bit more stash space being added. I think if we get to the point where we have double or so the current stash space, in addition to those specialized tabs that I just explained, we would be probably fine and most of our worries would be gone. But even right now, even trying to like rigorously sort out my loot and deleting a lot of really good items, I find myself making like 3-4 mules still, per season at least, full of boss mats, full of items, you know, amulets, rings, whatever. It just kind of feels bad to make mules, I gotta say. All right, let's talk about class balance. So obviously Season 6 has been kind of a shit show here with the Spiritborn. I like the Spiritborn, it's very fun to play Spiritborn, but also these bugs have really sucked out the fun of playing the class a little bit. So at least until Season 7, where I expect that we're gonna see massive changes to this and the bug fixes. Yeah, this is just kind of what it is. I don't really have that much motivation to, you know, min-max the Omega bug versions of every single build. I just played most of the like kind of like standard builds that, you know, I feel crafted, and that was really fun. I was just like stronger than intended, and okay, this is what it is. Yeah, overall, I think that class balance is in an okay spot if you ignore the Spiritborn bugs, but Spiritborn might still be too strong actually. So we'll see exactly how it will play out. I can't really put like exactly my thumb down on like, you know, what number it will be or something like that in terms of like how far can they push in a pit. We'll see, I guess, on the next PTR or something. Yeah, there might actually be still nerfs needed post bug fixes, but we'll see. Either way though, I think that with like how the game has developed now, Torment 4 farming is kind of the goal for most builds, and this should be the goal for the balance design as well right now. Blizzard originally said that Torment 4 should be only for like the very high-end stuff, you know, once you like really min-max on a good build and something. But the reality is that even all of the mid builds or even bad builds actually reached on 4 farming capacity at some point. It's not really such a high target as Blizzard has made it seem to be, and this should probably be the target for balancing in the future. So as long as they can do like, you know, easy peasy Nightmare Dungeons in T4 and you know, Infernal Hordes and all this kind of stuff, and you can farm like, you know, Pit 65 to 75 or so, I think this is kind of the target that we're looking for. And then maybe like pushing somewhere in like the 90 to 100-ish range, with some builds maybe going a bit beyond that, is okay. So this is like the general game balance that personally I would like to see for now, at least with the start that we had gotten so far in Season 6. I'll be kind of careful with overbuffing existing classes that are not Spiritborn, because all of them do have very good builds, some more, some less. But there are multiple builds on every class that go beyond Pit 100 already. So I will be kind of careful here with, you know, making sure that they don't, you know, just like fly off to like, you know, Pit 120 or plus or something like that. Because the thing is that there's such a massive gap between Torment 4 and let's say a Pit 100 that we're kind of back in the same place where we were before the expansion, where outdoor content in World Tier 4 is an absolute joke. Pit is the only relevant kind of challenging content. I think it's fine that the Pit scales to infinity. It's not fine that Pit is the only thing that poses any kind of challenge in the late game. So I'd rather see like Torment 4 still being something of like an objective and kind of tough to reach, at least until, you know, you have like really good gear, for example. Then, you know, builds shouldn't really go way too far beyond that, I think, when it comes to like the end game pushing in the pit. So that's just kind of like my opinion on this. I hear a lot of people saying stuff like, please just buff all your classes to do Pit 150, and, you know, why would I even play the other classes if they can't do 150 and so on. I think Pit 150 should not be the standard. It should not be the target for anyone, because again, you know, this is so far disconnected from anything else in the game that it's just gonna be like, you know, another clown fiesta basically if we get to that point. So, you know, Torment 4 monsters should still be at least something of an obstacle, let's say. So that's just like kind of my opinion on this. I think the best class to look at are probably Druids right now. Druids are kind of like the middle of the pack here. They have a bunch of builds that are like above Pit 100 on like the higher end push scenario, and it's just, yeah, probably the best balanced class overall right now. So maybe we should try to bring everything kind of closer to the druids here. So this is like my opinion here. But overall, I do have to say that the stat squish that we were supposed to be getting, which I guess we did get, we have slightly less HP these days, and we have like, you know, smaller weapons at least. But that's basically about it. Everything else was kind of improved. We have way more DPS than we used to have in Season 5, and literally by a factor of like a ×10 or ×100 even on existing classes, because the runes, because the glyphs are stronger, we have more paragons, we have, you know, more tools and so on. So generally everyone just got a lot stronger instead of actually squishing the numbers. So I would really like to see this being like revamped again in expansion 2, for example. For now, it is what it is. You know, we do billions of damage, we do dozens of billions of damage. This is how expansion 1 will go now, I guess, and not really too much that we really can do about it without everyone rage quitting. But in expansion 2, I'd really like to give that feedback to Blizzard. It doesn't matter how much you nerf everything, because the expansion is a blank slate. You know, no one cares if the numbers are smaller or something like that. Just like properly squish everything, you know, bring us back to, you know, way smaller numbers, basically. You know, like fix the overall balancing issues that we have, and this would probably be like the long-term objective here, like a proper stat squish. You know, WoW has done it. You know, ask your colleagues, and everything went fine. Yeah, this is kind of like what I would like to see in the future, at least in like long term. The last few points here. Season theme. So the Realm Walker was kind of unsuccessful, I gotta say. It's kind of an interesting thing, but it's just not really fun to do. It's overpowered because the opals are just like really good. I talked about the boss material drops, for example. You just go there, you get like 2-3 hours of opals, and you get extra XP, you get insane amounts of extra loot from the opals. I think people are really gonna miss those rewards next season. I guess one big problem that the whole season theme also had was that you just like did like one Realm Walker, and then you just self-sustained opals for the next like 24 hours or something, because you had this reward track on the Sucker Room, and they just gave you more opals and more opals and more opals. And you never had a reason to go do the Realm Walker again after doing it like once on a character. So that's kind of weird, I gotta say. Why does the season theme sustain itself? Like, why do you not want people to actually go do the season theme? But okay. Yeah, overall, I think that Realm Walkers are kind of interesting though. I think they could just stay in the game with like a revamp, make them more fun, or, you know, just make them like a boss that runs around somewhere and you can just fight him without, you know, this, you know, following him around and whatever. For example, one time I was like going around, like, you know, doing my side quests, not looking at the map or anything. And I just walked into a Realm Walker, and, you know, there was like this massive behemoth walking through the jungle, and that was really cool, actually. And suddenly I started like fighting all these guys. So I would like to see something like that, where it's like some kind of like, you know, just hidden. He's like kind of like popping up somewhere, walking around, and then you can find him, you fight him, and then you go in there and you do the thing. That would be maybe like a long-term like new feature, I guess. That would be really fun without this, you know, whisper, without the event popping up, without showing you where it is or something like that. It's just something that you run into as a reward for exploring the area or something like that. And lastly, just like, you know, random future ideas that I had here that I have been discussing. I would like to see 2 new game modes in Diablo 4. One that is a bit like Torghast or Hades, where you have like kind of like a roguelite. You start a run, let's say level 1, and then like, you know, every level you go through, you get like power-ups, or you get like, you know, choices of rewards and stuff like that. And you kind of like, you know, fight harder and harder challenges that are, you know, kind of like a very high skill ceiling component, basically. Where it's like different from the typical character progression where you just level up and get gear and so on, but you actually have like, you know, specific upgrades that's tied to that game mode. And this could be like a fun, like, you know, I just want to do like 2 hours of this kind of thing, where, you know, you go in and you have like a fresh run. I really like this roguelite kind of stuff here, and I think in Diablo 4 this could work really well. The engine is good, the gameplay is good, and there's a lot of potential here to, you know, make a really fun game mode out of that. I understand this is like a lot of effort, but this could be like a really cool setting point as well for a future expansion or something. And lastly, I think, especially after doing a bit of like low-level PvP lately, it would be fun to do something like a Battle Royale. I know Battle Royale is kind of like overused in many games and stuff like that these days, but I think it actually fits really well in Diablo 4. The Fields of Hatred that we have right now and like the high-level PvP is like really stupid. When people have like full builds, it's just like about one-shotting each other basically most of the time. But low-level PvP is actually really good in Diablo 4. And I would really like to see something like that being introduced. PoE has done that, for example, relatively successfully, I think. And I think in Diablo 4 could work even better because you just have relatively decent balance in low levels. There could be some tweaks maybe, but overall, the existing stuff that we have is actually really suitable for low level PvP, like the existing skill trees, the existing items, and so on. We can just like imagine this scenario, you have like 100 people that spawn like all over the fractured peaks or somewhere in a hunter in a jungle or, you know, somewhere in dry steppes. The entire zone is you know, confined, you can't get out, you can't waypoint anywhere, and everything is PvP. And then you go do events, you try to get some legendaries there, there's a butcher running around murdering people, you know, the area gets progressively smaller and eventually kind of like everyone, like, you know, converges into the same like small little spot and fights it out to the death. And, you know, on the way there, like, you know, you try to hunt down other players, you get XP for killing them, you get the loot when they die. Like, there would be so much cool potential here for something like this. I think it could be really fun, to be honest. Even for people that may think that they don't really care much about PvP, I would definitely expect a lot of people would try something like this, because as I mentioned, like PvP is just like unpopular in general, I think, in ARPGs, but it's also mostly unpopular, I think, because it's so imbalanced and so like gimmicky, let's say, because, you know, okay, you one-shot me or I one-shot you, and this is mostly about it. But low level PvP is very different from that. It's actually like a back and forth, you fight around the potion cooldown and these kind of things, and it's actually really fun. Yeah, maybe at least some inspiration for the future. And that also concludes this video here, so hope you enjoyed this. Just let me know what you think about my feedback that I gave here. Maybe you have some other cool ideas about, you know, what Blizzard could do with, you know, certain types of content that we have now, with new ideas for the future, with, you know, everything I just talked about, for example. And let me know what you think. So I'm gonna send this to Blizzard and see what they say, or if they do anything of it. I just keep giving feedback all the time anyway about a lot of stuff, but I thought now would be a good time to also sit down and do a bit of more of a structured approach as well. So hope you enjoyed this video here. Stay tuned for the next one, and see you guys then.